Get things started here. Welcome and thank you for joining us this morning for the third episode of the CSB SJU Professional Development Series. My name is Evan Bojar from the class of 2012, and I'm a member of the Alumni Development Committee of the St. John's Alumni Board. Before we begin today's session, please note that Tim will answer questions throughout the session. So if you have any questions for today's speaker, please enter them into the chat at the bottom of the screen. This session will be recorded and posted on social media within 2 to 3 business days. Today, we are joined by Tim Mayer. He's a 2000 SJU grad with a BA in history and has spent more than 15 years working in talent acquisition. He currently is the Director of Talent Acquisition for Kraus Anderson, located downtown, and is responsible for creating and implementing their enterprise-wide talent acquisition model, as well as partnering with the business leadership in recruitment strategy and talent delivery. He's a member of the Henneman Carver Workforce Development Board, as well as the Construction Management Advisory Board for Dakota County Technical College, and also volunteers his time with organizations such as Toys for Tots and Feed My Starving Children. Tim will also be touching on LinkedIn during our time together, but if you'd like to go back to the dedicated presentation we had about LinkedIn a few weeks back, and we'll post the link to the Kickstart 2021 event we hosted at that time. And now I will kick things over to Tim.
All right. Thank you, Evan. Can everybody hear me all right? Good morning. Thanks for joining us today. I really appreciate you spending some time this morning with me. Evan approached me a few months ago about participating in this great event that the alumni associations are putting on, and I was excited to do it. Topic was hiring trends, and so pretty broad topic. I zeroed in, as you can see here, on career development and job search during a global pandemic, or anytime really. So my thought is we'll kind of shade the discussion today about what's going on during the global pandemic that we're currently in, and looks like we may be in for a while, but certainly feel like these are valuable topics no matter what is going on in the greater world. And so, as I noted, it's a very broad topic, and what I'd like to do, and Evan noted that it's interactive, so if you have questions, if everybody could just take a minute and put in any questions they have or topics that they wish would be covered today. I know Ann is going to be monitoring that and can share those with us. And then if you have additional questions in real time about subjects that come up, I certainly want to hear those as well. All right. So Evan already gave a wonderful introduction about me, but a history major at SJU. Certainly enjoyed my time there back in the late 90s and 2000s. Just a wonderful experience there, which I'm sure you all had as well. I did go on and get a master's degree in HR. Not sure exactly why I was drawn to the field, but I have been working in it with more of a focus on talent acquisition for the last 16 years. And so excuse me, talent acquisition is the new trendy way to say recruitment. So I help our company identify top talent, both at the campus level as well as experienced. And so I'm very passionate about it, love the field, and happy to share some insight from my side of that relationship today. And certainly at Kraus Anderson Companies, somehow stumbled into construction about 10 years ago and really do love the business. So before we talk a little bit about the global pandemic, I think there's kind of three universal tools for success within the career development and job search. And so the first one is building your network. So if you are somebody that was caught up in a potential layoff due to this global pandemic, or somebody who's actively searching, your best opportunity is going to be to build your professional network, to find that next job. And so the reasons there is, and there's a lot of stats out there that 50, even 70% of open jobs never hit the job boards or the employment marketplace. And so what does that mean? There's only one way to find out about those jobs, and that's having an inside source. And you can do that by connecting with people and networking to figure out what's going on. And even if a job does hit the job boards, certainly having a warm referral through your network is going to better position you for that particular role with that company than just being an applicant off the street. I mean, for an in-demand job, you might see 100, 200, 500, 1,000 applicants. And so anything you can do to differentiate yourself and make that cold call, so to speak, warmer would be very valuable to you. Second group of people that could benefit from a different tool would be those that maybe are kicking the tires, looking at other opportunities, thinking things just aren't perfect here. Let's see what else is out there. And so I would encourage everybody there to also build their network to become kind of a passive candidate. We spend hours and hours, maybe more time at our job than anywhere else with those we love. And so I think that I would encourage you to take a look and make sure that you really are happy being challenged in your role, and also on that career path that you want to be. And I understand everybody's got a little bit different approach to career and family and things like that, but I think we all deserve to be happy and challenged in our jobs. And one way to kind of learn and see what's out there is to build and leverage that professional network. And certainly through that process, you might also find out that the grass isn't always greener at those other companies. And so that is certainly good information to know. And one more tool is for those that are absolutely adamant that they're not going to find another job. Everything is going wonderfully in their current role. Maybe their job isn't one where networking benefits a lot. Maybe a nurse, or maybe you're self-employed, but there's also great value in building your professional network, even if that's you. And there's a couple of reasons for that. One, networking is a very broad topic, and it doesn't just mean asking people about jobs and who do they know and how can you land that next job, but it's about connecting with people in the larger community, whether it's in your industry, and an opportunity to pay it forward. If you are in a great spot in your career, there's people coming up, whether it's from CSB, SJU, or anywhere really, that could benefit from your professional knowledge and success. And so thinking about that, even if you are adamant that you're happy, there's no benefit to networking. And the last thing I would make is even if you are in that last bucket, we're in the middle of a global pandemic. There was massive, giant layoffs just 10 months ago. And I would bet that a lot of those people that were caught up in that layoff, on March 1st of 2020, didn't think their job was in jeopardy or that they'd be looking for a new job in the next couple of months. And so certainly things change quickly. And a global pandemic is certainly a once in 100-year thing, not going to happen very often, but mergers, acquisitions, a reorganization at your organization, a new manager who wants to bring in his own people. And so a strong professional network, I'd liken it to insurance. You certainly want to have it in place before you need it. And so if you can kind of think about it in that regard, I think you'll find it to be an extremely beneficial tool for your success. And in today's day and age, people like me spend pretty much all day, every day with the four people in my immediate family. And so I think there's certainly some value in making connections with other people, learning new things, and having that opportunity to do it. And I know last week's session was on finance, and one of the financial kind of foundations is the idea of compounding interest. And I think your network is similar to that, in that it builds exponentially as you continue to grow, maintain, and develop that network. And the last thing I would point to is being visible. I've got a saying from my perspective as a recruiter that our jobs, it's easier for us to find what we're looking for when it finds us. So if you're out there in your employment marketplace, people know who you are. You can be approached even without asking or thinking about it, about great opportunities to advance your career, get a new job, or just be active in your communities. And there's certainly value in that. So that's kind of the focus of the session today. If there's any specific questions beyond that, the next slide I'm going to go into is going to just talk a little bit about the employment trends. And so I kind of split them into two buckets here, kind of what's happening because of the global pandemic, and then two, some more general trends that I think are pertinent for people to understand. And I certainly think that both of these are connected. So there's not really a differentiator between them, and I think they're all important. And so from the global pandemic standpoint, certainly we're all aware of the economic downturn. If you follow the news at all, you understand that people have lost jobs. There's been mass layoffs. You might find out that there's not a lot of job postings. A couple of key takeaways there, and this kind of ties back into networking. I can assure you with 100% certainty that companies are still looking to add good people. And so the network is the way to find out about those opportunities. They may not be posted, they might not be accurate. And the additional caveat there, if you were laid off or you know somebody that was, it's a stressful situation. I certainly get that, but give yourself a little grace, because employers such as Kraus Anderson and everybody really is understanding of this very unique time. And so what I would encourage you to do, if time allows, is to take your time and find that right opportunity if you're in a position to do so. I think the other positive, I shouldn't call it a positive, but I think one of the results of this massive downturn in economic activity is there's going to be a huge pent up demand when things presumably get back to normal. And I think we all know that, and we were just talking about it before, we might never get back to what was normal on March 10th of 2020, but we'll start heading in that right direction, whether it's March, July, or later in the year. The second one is remote work and technology. I read a super interesting article a couple of weeks ago from a tech CEO who noted that our use, our adoption, our reliance on connectivity tools in remote work setups has jumped forward 6 years in the last 10 months. So we have really embraced that. We've continued to improve on that. And so remote work and technology in terms of career, I think the key thing here is it really opens up new opportunities. For example, I live in Plymouth. Maybe my dream job was to work at 3M over in Woodbury. And just due to my personal situation, I can't spend 60, 80 on snowy days, 2 hours in the car each way going there. And so when you think about the overall economy's transition into remote work, we certainly can open up the geographic nature of our job search. In fact, if you follow the news at all, the big employers, the big trendy employers out on the East Coast and the West Coast, whether it's tech or finance, are looking at full-time remote forever. So I guess if you're interested, or dream job is to work for Google or Facebook or Microsoft, that might not be out of reach from where you currently sit today. And even if a job is not expressly saying that it's remote, maybe that's a discussion point you can have throughout the process. And the next item was the idea of work-life blend. And so I think we're all familiar with work-life balance. And I think work-life balance is a little bit about compartmentalizing and giving proper attention at the right time to your work or your non-work life. We're starting to see, and this is probably even before the pandemic, this idea of work-life blend. And what that means, and I'll have to read the definition here, is finding ways to step away from either work or life without having to compromise, sacrifice, or favor one over the other. And so it's a little bit of a different thinking. It sounds very similar, but it's a little bit different thinking in how the employment relationship works. And good employers, top places to work, destination employers are understanding this. And you as an employee, if my child has a science project that I need to help him with from 10 to 11, I need to communicate that to my employer. And I work at a good place, so they're understanding and appreciate that communication. But it also means I may have to toss on the laptop at 7:30 to finish up that report that I didn't get to do. And so it's really connecting those two things. And then if you are in the job search, you're talking to people or networking, this virtual world that we're in is certainly front and center. We are now hiring people that never set foot in our building. The good old handshake that was always paramount to making these decisions and really getting a feel for somebody has gone away, and it's not easy for employees to do or employers to do, and it's probably not easy for employees to do. So if you're out there talking to people, engaged, wanting to figure out what's out there, you have to understand that in this virtual environment, you are not able to fully understand the situation from this new virtual world. And then the last caveat there would be you got to understand these tools, especially if you're active in networking or interviewing and things like that. You need to understand the tools of the trade and how we want to do that. More on the general side, again, I think connected though, we're seeing a lot of employers, ours included, that have a renewed focus on soft skills. And so I think this is great news for those of us that went to CSB SJU because that liberal arts education really hits on these things that employers are deeming to be very important right now. And I know that in my job, any success I've had has been because of some of those things that I learned during my time at SJU. In that research, analytical, critical thinking, problem solving. I think my writing skills were really developed there. And these are things that employers are putting much, much more value on as they look for new hires. Even to the point where, again, these high-tech companies out on the California are swinging back towards filling their employment ranks with more people that have that ability to think critically, to look at a problem differently, and effective communication. And so these are the things that I took away from my education at St. John's and still use to this day. And I think it opens up more opportunities for people to explore and look at different careers. If you think of a job as when I'm looking at somebody, we want somebody that hits the bullseye of our target. But when you put together a strong network and your ability to showcase and demonstrate these soft skills, you can get hired for a job where maybe you don't hit the bullseye, but you're on the target. I mean, you certainly still have to have some foundational skills for many roles, depending on where you're at. But these are things that are important to employers such as myself, and we look for them. On the diversity, equity, and inclusion standpoint, this is something that's been building for a while. I think it certainly came to a head, especially here locally in the early part of the summer with the George Floyd, and then some of the unrest that spiraled across the country from that. And it's good. It's past time that companies really do make this a focus, and that's not easy for me to say as a white male, but it's good. We need organizations, all of them need diversity of thought, perspective, and it's not just the typical diversity measures of people of color, underrepresented populations. It's diversity of thought, and so I think that the old fallback for hiring managers at Kraus Anderson, and I think at most companies, is that person was great, but they're not a culture fit, and that's such a cop out. That's basically saying they're not like us. They're different, and they're not going to work here. And so what I've encouraged our leaders to do, and this is not just something I came up with, but think of everybody as a cultural add. What does this person add to our culture? Not just how do they fall in line, but what do they add? Mental health, huge these days. Good employers, much like the work-life piece, are putting it front and center, and understanding that to varying degrees, employees may be struggling now with work, with home. And so offering up those resources, allowing people to take vacation, and just really providing people grace. And this is one of those things, along with some of these work-life blend, work from home, that I hope don't go away when things return a little bit more to normal, because they are important. We can't, it doesn't seem fair that we bend over backwards for our employees in this troubled time, but then when things are a little bit normal, it's back to exactly how things are. So hopefully that's another permanent change that will come out of our current situation. And then the last bullet here is just training and development, and employers, sorry, are really focusing on this for a couple of reasons. One, to grow the skills that they need in their employment base, but also for engagement, retention. And what that means if you're actively searching for a job or a new job is, again, you can bring to the table what you have, and employers, will invest in you based on some of those soft skills that we talked about. And so everything is an opportunity in this time.
So Tim, we have some questions for you related to this slide. And then we have a couple others that are you'll probably cover when you get to your LinkedIn section. But we have, particularly in regard to the virtual interviewing pieces that you discussed.
Yeah.
One question was, are you seeing an increased use of automated assessments for hiring, given the lack of face-to-face interviewing? And do you feel this is adding value to the hiring process, increasing the quality of the hire?
Right. I can only speak to what I know. We are not doing that. We don't hire enough people where it's beneficial for us to leverage some of that AI in our decision making. I do know that companies, larger companies, many companies really are relying on that. And so it is definitely the wave of the future. It's things we've looked at and studied, but it's not something that I'm super able to share my personal experience with at this point, but that's where we're headed.
Okay. Another question is, how has the process of determining a good fit with potential employees changed in the light of remote interviewing and remote working? How have routines evolved?
That's a great question. I think it's probably not one that's been answered, by my company. Again, I can mostly speak to my company, but it is where we're at, and so we need to get comfortable. And so one of the things that we've done even before this pandemic was I've led a bunch of interview training for all of our hiring managers about how we can be a little bit more effective in that. It's real easy to just look at a resume and say this person's exactly what we need, and not really explore some of those finer points about what they've done and how they would, do it here at Kraus Anderson. That's probably the biggest one. And on the flip side, I think employees changing jobs is a giant move for most people. And I alluded to it a little. It's difficult to get a feel for things when you're making such a massive decision, talking like you and I are right now on the screen. You don't necessarily get to see the workspace. Now, you might be able to see videos, but I would argue that it's not quite the same. And so it's going to be interesting to see how it shakes out again when things return to normal. What's going to be the preferred route? It's more efficient, perhaps, to do virtual interviews, but it's difficult for both sides to properly assess.
Yeah. And one of our, Joe asks, I have found growing my network has been more difficult since most of the working world went virtual. Is there a database of CSB SJU alums in various fields that is accessible for alums to connect with new people? And I will mention that we have, obviously, LinkedIn is a great place to find Benny's and Johnny's. There's a way to search by the school you went to. And then also we have Benny's Connect and Johnny's Connect available for it's an online database. So we can send information about some of that in our follow-up email as well for folks. But there are multiple ways to build your Benny Johnny network. Thank you, Adam.
Yes, absolutely.
Herb's just posted about it.
Absolutely. I do have a slide on that, which if we get to it, we can scurry over a little bit. But I did LinkedIn. I found 4 groups. Adam helped me identify that, and combined there was over 39,000 alumni. And as Adam noted, and I saw in my experience, they're easily searchable. and it's a great tool.
Yep. We do also have one person that was asking about tips on handling employer age-related perceptions. And I don't know if you want to handle that at a later time, but that's a topic area that someone's interested in.
Yeah. That's good. I mean, I didn't have any plan to cover that. So I'm just in thinking about it. Not to cop out on what I'm trying to cover here today, but the importance of a network, I think, is how you can overcome that. If you are looking for a new job and you simply apply for position X and you've got 30 years of experience, well, it's easy for whomever is looking at your resume to say, overqualified, or maybe this person's even too close to perceived retirement age, pass, next one. But if you're able to leverage connections and explain, really explain what it is you're looking for, I think that's probably the best way to navigate that. And I think the other part of the question was about networking in our current environment. And it's an interesting question because it kind of cuts both ways. I think for some people, it's probably easier to network virtually. One, because neither party necessarily needs to commute anywhere to meet. And depending on where you're at, I mean, that can be a big thing. I mean, you can't get anywhere in Minneapolis in less than 30 minutes, right? So you're losing 30 minutes each way. And so but I think there's something to be said about getting together in person with somebody over that, simply offering to buy them a cup of coffee is kind of a nice way to have that conversation. And that's not really something you can do virtually. I mean, I've just personally, I've met some people for lunch. They're more personal connections, but it really depends on what people are comfortable with. I mean, people are in the restaurants, people are in the coffee shops, and depending on your comfortability with things, I think all options are on the table. Some people might really enjoy virtual networking. Some people might not. And so it does cut both ways.
On that note, Dan asks, there are also, quote, "You're too young and inexperienced," unquote, age-related challenges. How do today's graduates overcome that perception?
Well, not to go back to my fallback, but again, that idea of networking, right? If people understand who you are beyond just that piece of paper, your resume and or your LinkedIn profile, they can go. I'm a Gen Xer, right? Almost a millennial, and I'm caught right in the middle, and I find it both ways. But I'm literally just blown away by how sharp and driven this next group of employees is, and I personally am willing to go to bat for that idea of this person is smart, they're sharp, they get it. The runway, the trajectory here is something that should be valuable to our organization. Let's give them a look. And so if you can find an advocate wherever it is that can say that for just you, I think you can open up some doors that way.
Great. We don't have any new questions right now. We have a couple for your LinkedIn segment, so we'll wait for those.
Okay. All right. Well, I'll try and get that. I already see it's 8:32, so we'll move as quickly as we can in an appropriate manner. So building your network, just a couple of key things here that I would like to point out. It has to be an ongoing and continuous effort. I talked a little bit about that insurance, how it's like insurance, and that we don't just want to start it when we need it. It really needs to be a continuous effort. And the last two bullets are interconnected, right? LinkedIn is an awesome tool for making those connections, and there are going to be some transactional pieces to building and developing your network, and there's tools to help facilitate that. But really, where you're going to have success, and what I would encourage everybody to focus on is kind of looking at that as a funnel and really making meaningful connections with the people that you think could be helpful. And even to take a step back, just the definition of networking is it's really simply getting information or developing contacts. It's that simple. It doesn't need to be schmoozy or salesy. And thinking about activities that probably everybody on this Zoom is engaged in every day. It's just talking to people. You probably do a ton of networking that you don't think is networking, and what you need to do is be a little bit more deliberate about those efforts, I think, in order to really leverage that. For example, coaching Little League, right? You get to know the co-coach personally. This is just a personal story. And, he mentioned somewhere where he worked, and, as we developed a little bit better of a connection, I was able to leverage that for some information and help somebody in my network get a job there. And so it's just thinking about that, and it's a fine line, right? You don't want to jump strictly to business. You need to make connections to people that don't seem to have an immediate ask attached to them. The other thing to consider or think about is networking is 100% appropriate business activity. It's professional. There's nothing wrong with it. You may feel like you're cheating on your current employer if you're currently engaged, but again, there's value in that, and it's certainly an appropriate activity. The other thing I'd say, and this is interesting in our times of virtual meetings, but networking doesn't need to be uncomfortable. It shouldn't be uncomfortable, even if you say, "Hey, Tim, I'm an introvert. I don't like this," and I don't think there's any need to feel that way. And we'll talk a little bit more about that, but it is not. It's not a job interview. You're just connecting with people like you do in your everyday life. So I think I talked a little bit about being deliberate in the process. And so before you even start thinking about, how to leverage your personal network, you got to do some planning and research. I mentioned you got to continuously work at this and commit to it. And it is some work. It's not just going to happen unless, again, you're deliberate about it. And so as you think about it, what are you passionate about? If you aren't a career search, you're considering it, or just want to grow within your industry or field, what are you passionate about? Do a little research. Who's out there in your marketplace? What's your dream job? These are the things that can kind of help focus your efforts a little bit. Part two is, I talked about it. We all do networking activities probably every single day. So who's already in your orbit? Your friends, your friends' friends, your parents' friends, church groups, industry associations. These are all, parts of your network, and how strong of a part they are is really dependent on how deliberate you are in that, in those activities. Social organizations. It's about flipping the people you already know into a little bit more useful, and from a professional development standpoint. Again, useful might not be the right word there, but transitioning into more of that role. Before you start building that marketing plan, what I mean by that is establish your what I would call your employment brand. Who are you as an employee? What do you bring to the table? How are you different? Some people might call this a 30-second elevator speech, which may be an older way to approach this, but I certainly think thinking about that as you set out to develop networks and have networking meetings is super important. And during this part two, make sure your resume, and I've got some additional slides on that, as well as your LinkedIn page are up to date. Your LinkedIn page is really your digital representation, probably the one that's going to be seen the most of who you are, why you're different, and why you bring potential value to an organization. Committing to the effort, and I talked about it. It's time, but you got to make that commitment. So if you're completely happy where you're at, I would still encourage you to spend 5, 10, 15 minutes a day thinking about your network, who's in it, and how you could continue to develop that. If you're active in your search, you need to do that, and then maybe set a target of one networking meeting, whatever that looks like these days, a week. If you're passive and just want to explore potential careers in your field, maybe your target is to have one networking conversation a month. It really just depends on where you're at, but it is something that you need to commit to. I would also encourage you to develop a tracking system, like a Excel spreadsheet or whatever, understanding who the contacts are. It allows you to kind of have your own customer CRM, customer relation management software. So you've got that in front of you. And then lastly, be optimistic and realistic. When you're reaching out to people, I always like to tell candidates and managers that you very rarely get anything you don't ask for. And so don't be afraid to, maybe don't shoot for the CEO or the COO, but find an appropriate contact within whatever organization or whatever you're trying to do. And guess what? The worst thing they can do is say no. And if they do say no, ask them who would be an appropriate contact at that organization. And then be realistic, right? That the network is an extremely valuable tool, but it doesn't necessarily going to turn into a job in 2 weeks if you're active in a search. So understand that it takes time to cultivate and develop. So when I talked about not getting anything you don't ask for, when you do reach out to somebody, whether it's an email, a phone call, LinkedIn message, I think you need to be very specific about what you're looking for, whether that's information, a meeting. And so when you set up those network meetings, I talked about how this does not need to be an uncomfortable process, and it certainly doesn't. It is not an interview, right? But on the other hand, I would say, excuse me, treat it like an interview. So make sure you're prepared in advance, dressed appropriately. Certainly you don't need to put on a suit to go grab coffee or do a virtual coffee with somebody, but put on some clothes that make you feel professional and in your element, whatever that might be. So when you do have these meetings, the simplest advice is just be yourself, right? It's not an interview. Trust me, ask your friends, your family, you're interesting, you're witty, you're funny. Whomever you're meeting with is going to love you. So, be yourself, relax, and just enjoy the conversation. Second, I put here, be open. This is a business meeting, typically networking is, but I think an opportunity to divulge a little beyond the workplace is how people make meaningful connections outside of just talking about the specifics of jobs. So don't necessarily, and you got to pick and choose here, but don't necessarily be afraid to avoid sharing a little bit about personal components. Be inquisitive. I would say a simple plan of attack is to plan to listen more than you talk. I was given some good advice from somebody at an event once. He said, be more interested than interesting. So really show some interest in whomever you're meeting with. On the flip side of that, you probably are looking to have something come of this. So, pick your spots and be willing to talk about yourself. But I think people that you've asked to spend some time with you are going to be flattered. They're going to love it. People love to talk about themselves. And I'm saying that in a positive way. And then lastly, be generous. Think about something you might offer up that person that you're meeting with, and maybe that person is 2, 3, 7 steps ahead on the career progression that you're meeting with, and you think, geez, what could I possibly offer this person? Give it some thought. Maybe you don't come up with anything, but just a simple, hey, if there's anything I can do to help you, I'm happy to do it. If there's anybody in my network I can connect you with, I'd love to do it. So, and then lastly, always say thank you, follow up with a thank you, and then stay in touch, right? Meeting a connection is awesome, but the further you get away from that meeting, the less powerful that connection becomes. And so it's important that we maintain those relationships. Whether that's just a quick note on LinkedIn, a quick phone call, quick text, depending on things, quick email saying, hey, really enjoyed chatting with you, or I saw you posted this, or I saw this about company X, just checking in. That's how you maintain those things. I mean, nobody wants to meet with you 3 years ago, and then you've got an immediate opportunity, and then you reach out of the blue. It just seems a little transactional. So really committing, and I understand everybody you talk to and everybody you meet with might not be one of those valued connections that you spend a great deal of time on, but think about that. Just some additional considerations. I covered most of these, so real quickly, you aren't simply asking for a job. You know what, in your mind, you might actually be simply asking for a job, but I think you want to approach it as though you're not just asking for a job. Most people are flattered by requests. Not everybody, certainly not everybody, but I think that if you think about things that way, you can become a lot less nervous. Learn, get contacts, develop that tracking system, covered all of those. And then lastly, prepare questions. So I said it's not an interview, but maybe treat it like it is, and do some preparation. I think introverts, as we noted, might think that they're not good at this and they're not good at schmoozing. And there's an approach or a tool to the networking process that I think can be valuable for those people. And that's the idea of an informational interview. And you're just literally interviewing somebody about their career. And what this benefits, how this benefits people is that if you approach it and even pitch it to somebody as an informational interview, it allows you to kind of take control of what that meeting's going to be. It provides a framework for the meeting. And, if you're nervous about meeting somebody, you're not good at small talk, you can prepare questions in advance. And so you go into that with a plan, and then nerves fade away, and you end up having an opportunity to go over your questions. Certainly preparing and getting those questions right. My advice is to try and flip it as much into a conversation as you can, maybe not so much an interrogation sort of a deal. But I think it's a great tool. It's a great way to pitch it, depending on where you're at too in your career and how you want to do it. But I do believe that it is a really nice framework that can help you set the stage for whatever the networking looks like.
Hey, Tim, we have a couple of questions as you're getting to LinkedIn, so I thought I'd give you a minute to take a sip of coffee and I'll ask a couple of questions. What is the guidance to listing your actual title versus people listing a set of identifiers on your LinkedIn profile? And the other is, do you recommend using the phrase open to work banner in LinkedIn? Those are the two LinkedIn questions.
Yeah. I think, and correct me if I'm wrong, I wasn't on the last LinkedIn one, but you have an opportunity to both highlight your current title as well as your unique summary. Evan, I think you talked a little bit about this.
Yeah, so that's in that. It'll be in that recording that we had from that first event as well. Basically, those identifiers just allows people to find you. So it's not a bad idea to do it. So if you had open to new opportunities and then you have those identifiers, I think it's easier for potential employers to find you.
Okay. So I do believe you have the option there. In terms of the open to work thing, that's new, primarily I think due to the current market because of the global pandemic. I don't see any harm in doing it. I mean, I don't feel like there's any negatives to doing it. I think that the connotation, or thinking about people who lost their jobs, I mean, it's viewed differently under our current circumstances. I think in the past, maybe people would say, well, why did they, get let go of their last job? And I think that thinking has completely gone away. Everybody understands that strange times, a lot's changed. So I think announcing that you're open to work is good, because people like me in my role are certainly interested in talking to candidates that want to talk to us. LinkedIn is a tool for typically finding passive candidates. And so if I were to reach out to 30 people on LinkedIn for a particular role, I might hear back from 3 of them. And so I can be pretty confident if you are open to work, that I'd hear back for you. So I would certainly encourage that. Anything else on the LinkedIn front?
Nope, those are the only 2 questions we have. So you can go for it.
So just to throw it in, because it is a huge tool in the networking. It's primarily, I think, on the front end, those transactional steps of meeting and reaching out to people, searching for people, whether it's in the groups. And as Evan noted, in both today and when he and I talked, that the session, the first Kickstart session, was just fantastic, and he learned, even as a heavy LinkedIn user, learned a great deal from that. So, would certainly encourage everybody to pull that up to learn about LinkedIn. There's also no shortage of information out there. How to maximize your LinkedIn, how to leverage it. So, a little research out there would be great. But my key point is this is the employment brand. This is your digital representation out there. So put some time into it. Get a photo on there. Don't put a photo on there with your significant other. A semi-professional, high-quality photo is going to be helpful. That professional summary, that's searchable. That's where you can pack a lot of information about you into a short bit of everything. Keep it professional. That used to go without saying, but these days, not so much anymore. I just know when I get something a little too personal, I'll typically I don't block the person, but I won't follow them anymore because I don't need that information in my feed. That's not what we're trying to do there. And then join groups of interest, which leads into my next slide, which we kind of already hit on, so I'm not going to talk about it. But these are the LinkedIn groups that Adam recommended when I had reached out and talked a little bit about the Alumni Association. And I will just say, from a personal standpoint, I have never, and I mean never, met a Benny or Johnny that's not willing to help out in this capacity. And so if you're looking for a place to start, I don't know if you can find a better spot than your alumni from CSB SJU, and a good way to dig in and find out who's who and who you may want to reach out to is these LinkedIn groups. They're searchable, a lot of functionality. So do that. One other option that I think bears some point, and it might get lost in the shuffle. I used to work in the search firm and consulting space, headhunters as some people call them, but they can be good opportunities to expand your network, to find a role. And the caveat here is it might not be for everybody, but certainly something to not write off. And search firms are companies that are paid by other companies who don't have time or the expertise to fill their positions. And so what you get there is they're well connected, extremely well connected. So you can almost outsource a little bit of your networking. They can do it on your behalf. And you notice the next bullet point is find a trusted advisor. If you're reaching out to these people, don't reach out to 30 of them. Find 1 or 2 that you really have a trust in, because they have your information. They're going to be representing you in the marketplace. And I certainly know some good ones if this is something you're interested in pursuing. But based on your industry, there's groups that specialize in IT, accounting, finance, general engineering, you name it. So it's an avenue to consider as you develop and build your network, even, again, if you're passive or relatively happy. And then the last bullet here is consulting. If you've got the opportunity, when we're in the middle of a pandemic, I think work still needs to get done. Companies might be willing to hire somebody on a project basis to do it. Again, if you work on a consultant, benefits and vacation and some of those things are a little different at a consulting company. So it's got to work for you, but it could be a great opportunity to get in with, test drive that company. You can find out that it's perfect, or maybe it's not at all what you thought it was going to be. So once you've leveraged all your networks and you've turned those into a meeting, you want to make sure you've got a resume. Again, just quickly, tons of information about there on the website, Google, about how to maximize your resume. What I would say here is I don't think a great resume is going to guarantee you a look, but I can promise you a crappy resume is going to probably cost you a look. So make sure you put some time into that. I'm not saying you need to spend $500 to have somebody write it for you, but give it some good thought, organize it correctly. And what I would do is tailor it to whichever organization and role you're hiring to. Make sure it's results focused and highlights your accomplishments. So I think people tend to, in their resume, just put their job duties. Most recruiters know what certain jobs do. So not just reciting what your duties are is not a good use of that page or two on your resume. Think about what you've accomplished. Numbers are great, success, and try and connect the dots between what you're looking at and what you're not. If you are unemployed and have been, think about some ways that you have filled in those gaps, whether it's volunteering, training, or be honest, if you're spending time with family and teaching your kids, that's okay too. But be prepared to talk about it or cover it on your resume. You've got this awesome resume. You've flipped it into the network meeting or the interview of your dream job. And so just a quick slide. I know we're running out of time on interviews.
Yeah, we do have one question about this, Tim, actually. We do have someone who is asking about what do you look for in interviewing candidates and tips for the interview. So since that's our last question, I'll throw that at you.
Oh, perfect. Yeah, that actually bodes well. So research, what I mean by that is somebody who knows something about our company. There is no bigger turnoff than somebody who clearly doesn't know why they're there or why it's intriguing or what the role is. So spend some time doing the research. For us, mission and core values is huge. Somebody that not only knows what they are, but can kind of make a connection between their background. That's something that really sticks with us at KA, and I think it is and becoming more important with other organizations too. The other thing I would discuss is thinking about behavioral based interviewing. It's kind of a best practice right now. And that's the tell me about a time you failed and how you handled it sort of a questions. And so what we are looking for is a very specific example of how you solved a problem, how you managed a conflict, not how we would, not how you would, but how you actually have. So there, again, I keep saying tons of research out there. Figure out what are some of the top behavioral based interviewing questions. And these are mostly soft skills, right? Conflict management, communication, prioritization, and think about potential responses. You might not get asked that question, but I think thinking about it makes sure that you're not flat footed and can kind of think about how to respond to these. There's the STAR, which is situation, task, action, and result. Think about those. You might have heard that in the career classes. Prepare and ask questions. Somebody that ties in with the research, understanding where you're at and why you're there. A great question or two at the end of an interview does wonders for that conversation and really does well. And then the last bullet point here is this virtual world. We've alluded to it a little bit, but when you're doing a virtual interview, understand the platform that it's going to be on. We use WebEx, which not a lot of people use, so we've had some issues. And if you get the link for the WebEx and it also has the phone number, don't just call the phone number. We want to see you. We want to engage with you person to person. And part and parcel with that is if you're doing it on a laptop, make sure your speakers work, make sure your camera and microphone work. I mean, I get it. Not everything's going to work perfectly on the technical side, but a little pre-work on the front end can help you be successful. All right, we're really running out of time now. Follow up. If you have an interview, thank you card can be a nice differentiator. I'm not necessarily saying you need to do that. A thank you email, absolutely. Again, a thank you card for me would sit on my desk maybe for months until I go back into the office. So, but it is very important to follow up. Very important to follow up. no matter what. If it's a networking meeting, an interview, a conversation, whatever it is, follow up and then maintain that.
Tim, I think we're at our time. I guess, do you have any kind of quick wrap up, or we're running out of time at this point?
Yep. No, I can end it there.
Okay. Okay. Perfect. Well, Tim and I have chatted a lot about stuff like this. I've been in the recruiting space as well. So if people have specific questions, if you want to leave them in the chat, I know last time we took some time to review those. So let's end it there. And like I said, if anybody has further questions, enter them in the chat now, and then we can kind of take those and get back to you that way. But unfortunately, that's all the time we have for today. Tim, thanks for taking the time to talk with us and discussing HR and hiring trends here in the COVID times.
Thanks.
I wanted
for having me.
Yeah, sorry, I wanted to get in some last notes here, kind of from the school year on further opportunities to build the network here. So Handshake is one. It's our online job board that's available for those who are looking for jobs or internships or looking to hire someone on both sides there. Recent grads and students can find opportunities there. Second, the CSB SJU Interaction Program connects St. Ben's and St. John's alums with current students for a casual, informal career conversation in person or virtually. Current students select one alum from the volunteer database to ask to lunch or coffee or virtually meet based on the alum's career field and place of employment. So those are a few opportunities to continue to network within the St. Ben's and St. John's communities. So I think that's it. And I guess, do you have any last words?
Nope, that's everything. Thanks everybody for coming.
All right. Thank you.